Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into complex topics to pull out the most vital insights and surprising facts. Today, we're embarking on a journey into a really chilling historical mystery, a series of unsolved crimes that absolutely terrorized a city more than a century ago. Our mission today is to unpack the story of the individual known only as the Dayton Strangler, an unidentified serial killer responsible for the tragic passing of multiple individuals in Dayton, Ohio, roughly between 1900 and 1909. We've assembled quite a stack of historical accounts, investigative reports, and detailed analyses to guide us through this really intricate and frankly terrifying case.
It's absolutely compelling. And what's truly fascinating here isn't just the profound impact these crimes left on the community, though that was immense. It's also how they really illuminate the state of early 20th century policing, the huge limitations of forensic science back then, and just the chilling reality of an unseen predator operating with, well, shocking impunity. We'll meticulously examine the victims, the scarce evidence, the parade of suspects, really, and the enduring theories that still kind of shroud this dark chapter, trying to understand not just what happened, but why, even today, definitive answers are just so elusive.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Imagine Dayton, Ohio, between 1900 and 1909, these years when these horrifying events unfolded. What was daily life actually like? And maybe more critically, how did the technological and social landscape of that time contribute to the huge, almost insurmountable challenges of solving these kinds of crimes? It feels like a completely different world in so many ways.
Oh, you're absolutely right to emphasize that distance. It's hard to grasp. Picture a city where immediate communication was a total luxury. Very few homes had a telephone, maybe one for every 20 people. Think about that. This wasn't a world of 911. If you discovered a crime or needed urgent help, you couldn't just pick up a phone. You might have had to run several blocks, maybe even miles, just to find a public telephone, and then wait for an operator to connect you.
Wow. Just that delay alone.
Exactly. It meant law enforcement response times lagged significantly. Often, by the time officers actually arrived, crucial initial evidence might have been disturbed or, the perpetrator long gone.
That immediate disconnect sounds like a massive hurdle. And what about just basic infrastructure? We're not talking brightly lit streets and electricity everywhere, are we?
Not at all. Electricity was equally rare in homes, which meant public spaces were, by our standards today, incredibly dark. Kind of wild, really. Imagine trying to navigate streets, parks, alleyways, often lit only by the faint flickering glow of gas lamps, if anything at all.
Yeah, that's hard to picture.
This pervasive darkness just inherently made nighttime travel dangerous, especially for women traveling alone. It created an ideal canvas for a predator, allowed them to operate largely unseen, to stalk and strike from the shadows with a terrifying advantage. It's almost impossible for us to really conceive of the vulnerability that created.
So a world without instant communication, not much light, and I assume not a city filled with cars either. How did people get around?
Cars were definitely a rarity, still a novelty for most. City dwellers primarily relied on public transportation, steam, diesel, and electric streetcars. They were often called traction cars.
Ration cars, right.
And these streetcar lines, they weren't just a convenience. They were the vital arteries of daily life. They ferried workers to big factories like the National Cash Register Works NCR, Dayton's largest employer. They really shaped the city's growth and patterns of life.
But that predictability could be dangerous too, I imagine.
Precisely. While they offered mobility, they also created predictable routes and schedules, easily observed. This meant a killer could potentially identify and follow potential victims, understand their movements, and know exactly where they might be most vulnerable, coming home from work, for instance. And then there's the more intimate infrastructure. Basic indoor plumbing, for example, wasn't universal. Outhouses and water closets were still common in residential backyards.
Right. Things we don't even think about.
These seemingly mundane details directly impacted how crimes could be committed and discovered. They created secluded, vulnerable spots right within what we'd consider a person's private space. A key insight here is how these conditions allowed a killer to just blend in, to move through the city without detection, exploiting the very fabric of early 20th century urban life.
And when it actually came to solving crimes, we're obviously talking about a pre-forensics era, aren't we? Big time.
Absolutely. The tools available to law enforcement back then were incredibly rudimentary compared to today. This period predates the systematic application of so many forensic sciences we take for granted. Fingerprinting, while it was known, wasn't widely or systematically used for criminal identification. Not like today.
And DNA was decades away.
Decades. Police relied heavily on witness descriptions, often unreliable due to low light panic, and on tracing common objects or footprints. But without centralized databases or advanced lab techniques, linking these clues across cases or to specific individuals was extraordinarily difficult.
So every little detail was critical, but hard to prove.
Exactly. It meant every small observation became incredibly important, yet also incredibly hard to verify or prove conclusively. This inherent lack of concrete scientific evidence meant investigators often found themselves operating largely in the dark, reliant on old-fashioned detective work and often, unfortunately, on coerced confessions.
Which we'll see played a pretty significant role in this case.
A very significant role, yeah.
Okay, so against this backdrop, limited technology, dim-lit streets, basic forensics, the terror began in Dayton in 1900 with the first known victim. Let's delve into Ada Lance's tragic story and how it set this terrifying, chilling precedent for the years that followed. Ada was just 11 years old, the daughter of a prominent local carpenter, someone well known in the community. On the evening she lost her life, her parents were hosting a joint birthday surprise party. 15 other married couples were there at their home on Leroy Street.
Right? House full of people.
And Ada left the house unnoticed during the festivities, just slipped out. What happened next is just horrifying. She was found only half an hour later, in the pit of an outhouse, sometimes called a vault, right in her parents' own backyard. The sheer proximity to a bustling party. It must have been utterly shattering for everyone there.
It was a scene of just unspeakable tragedy. The investigation revealed she had been badly mutilated and bruised. There was a distinct scar across her face from a blunt weapon, possibly a cane. She had also been sexually assaulted and strangled, her neck actually broken. And the coroner's conclusion was particularly shocking. She was still alive when she was placed headfirst into the narrow 15-inch hole of the outhouse. She ultimately perished from suffocation on the dirt and waste inside.
That's horrific.
Detectives found pieces of her clothing snagged on rose bushes in the neighbor's yard. This suggested she was attacked behind the fence of an abandoned house next door, dragged to the neighbor's yard for the assault, and then returned to her own outhouse.
And all within minutes, near a party.
What stands out is the shocking speed and brazenness. The entire ordeal was estimated to have taken less than 15 minutes, mere feet from a lively party. It revealed a predator completely devoid of fear, operating with a chilling familiarity with his hunting ground.
And the initial investigation.
Yeah,
they immediately look at several people, right? Who were the early suspects?
Yes, several were arrested pretty quickly and then released due to lack of evidence or solid alibis. There was an E.L. Fox, David Pinsel, William Mindle. Another was Nathan A. Emmons, described as an elderly crippled man with one leg and a cane. He'd been renting a shed in the neighbor's yard, seen near the Lance home.
And the cane matched.
His cane possibly matched the blunt weapon description, yeah. But he was ultimately cleared. Then there was 18-year-old Harrison Harry Blessing. He lived about 12 blocks away. He allegedly confessed to several people, actually detailing the crime. But later, he denied it all to the police and was released for lack of concrete evidence.
Did Blessing have a history?
He did, actually, a disturbing one, including attempted assaults at a circus, breaking into a woman's room to assault her. But his link to Ada's passing just couldn't be definitively proven.
Now, Ada's case stands a bit apart because of that big gap 6 years before the next similar incident. So why is it still linked to the Dayton Strangler?
That's a really astute observation. It does stand somewhat alone because of that unusual 6-year gap. But its disturbing characteristics, and crucially its location, led many investigators at the time and researchers since to believe it was connected. The proximity to future crime scenes is striking. It was barely a mile from where Donna Gillen's yacht was found years later, and only blocks from the Home Avenue Railroad spur, which becomes this recurring, ominous location for later attacks.
The railroad connection again.
Exactly. That area was known as a shady neighborhood back then, too, which kind of lent itself to dark deeds. There's also historical speculation about a man named Alfred A. Knapp, known as the Hamilton Strangler. Active in the broader region around this time, he had a chilling MO of attacking children, choking them.
Could he have done it?
He could have been responsible for Ada's murder, theoretically, but he was imprisoned in 1903 and executed in 1904, so that definitively rules him out for the later Dayton Strangler cases starting in 1906.
Okay, so that leaves a question mark over Ada's case.
It really does. Was it a standalone horror, or the very first act of a predator who then went dormant or moved away for years before resurfacing? The lack of resolution leaves that question unsettlingly open.
Okay, so after that 6-year hiatus, A chilling silence that might have given people a false sense of security. The fear returned to Dayton. Big time.
Yeah.
Tell us about Donna Gilman. She was 20 years old, worked at NCR, the National Cash Register Works. Her disappearance brought the terror right back.
Donna was last seen on November 20th, 1906. She was getting off a streetcar on her way home. It was a journey she usually made with her sister, but not that particular day. Her body was tragically discovered, concealed in weeds near Groveland Avenue.
And the scene itself was puzzling from the start, wasn't it?
Immediately, it presented investigators with profound puzzles. Her body was found in this odd, stiff position. Rigor mortis had fully set in, which implied she wasn't actually killed right there on the spot, but had been moved after she passed away.
So staging, or at least moving the body.
It hinted at a cunning perpetrator trying to mislead authorities, yeah. And furthermore, her clothes were wet from rain that had fallen. Yet her umbrella and gloves found nearby were perfectly dry and soft.
Wait, dry? How?
Exactly. It greatly perplexed the authorities, strongly suggested they'd been placed there more recently, maybe hours later, after the fact. 2 hat pins were also found near her body. One was bent, clearly indicating a struggle where her hat might have been torn off and then maybe placed back near her. Detectives believe the initial assault happened on the west side of Groveland Avenue, where they found traces of a struggle and then continued into the Commons area.
Intriguingly, the first thought was a jealous lover, wasn't it? Was that pursued?
It was, but that theory was quickly dismissed. Her friend, Stanley Anderson, who lived down near Cincinnati, had a solid alibi, confirmed he hadn't seen her for days before she vanished. The investigation then took a truly astonishing turn. A local man, David Curtis, known around town as Baby Day.
Baby Day?
Yeah, he was a 27-year-old described in records using the outdated and offensive term half-wit, referring to an intellectual disability. He was arrested and promptly confessed.
He confessed. Just like that.
His confession was quite detailed, actually. Claimed he boarded the same train as Donna, followed her, grabbed her umbrella, strangled her with it, and then cried over what he'd done. But, and this is a big, but this confession was highly doubted by many, including some authorities. Why? Because he had falsely confessed to another murder just 2 years prior.
Okay, so a history of false confessions.
Right. He later claimed he was gravely threatened by a county detective, Frank McBride. Said McBride threatened him with the death penalty if he didn't confess. Curtis was ultimately cleared and released, and apparently the public cheered when it happened. Highlights the deep distrust people had about forced confessions even back then.
And then, in a twist I still can't quite believe, the Gilman family themselves became suspects. That's just astounding.
Yes, it's a really shocking detail. An arrest warrant was actually put out for Donna's mother, Kate, and 2 siblings, Collins and Fane, as accessories to her murder.
Her own family? Why?
It gets complicated. Collins, Donna's 18-year-old brother, had actually testified against David Curtis, claiming Curtis had confessed to him. So that adds a layer of potential family conflict or strong dynamics. While in custody, Kate Gilman herself, under immense strain, tried to take her own life by jumping out a second-story window. Nurses managed to restrain her.
That's terrible.
And a coworker testified that Donna was reportedly abused by her mother and had even expressed fear about going home that specific night. It adds this profoundly complex and disturbing layer.
So what happened to them?
The family was eventually released on bond and later cleared of any involvement. Sadly, Kate passed away from edema just a year later and was buried beside Donna. The consensus today is that none of the arrested suspects, not David Curtis, not the family, were the actual perpetrator, especially given that similar terrifying acts continued.
Which brings us to August 1907. The pattern of terror continued, but this time it escalated into a double tragedy in McKay Park. This involved 24-year-old Anna Markovitz, daughter of a pawnbroker from Kentucky, and her 11-year-old friend, Abe Cohan, a young traveling salesman from Indianapolis. This is such a critical piece, including the only male victim attributed to the strangler. A real shift.
It was a shocking escalation. They were walking along the secluded road near the National Soldiers' Home, along with Anna's younger sister, Bertha. They reached a completely isolated spot in McCabe Park, stopped to chat. Suddenly, a man appeared from the darkness. He crept up behind Cohan and struck him hard on the back of the head with a weapon described sometimes as a baton, sometimes a blackjack.
From behind again.
Yes. Surprised, Abe turned around only to be shot twice in the stomach.
Oh, God. Shot. That's different.
Yes. Bertha, understandably terrified, managed to escape and ran screaming for help from the nearby soldiers' home. When a posse, alerted by her cries, got back to the scene, Abe was barely clinging to life. Anna was found lifeless, tragically strangled, her clothes nearly torn off, her arms covering her eyes as if shielding herself. Clear evidence of a brutal struggle and sexual assault.
Right.
Abe succumbed to his injuries 2 days later in the hospital. He was unfortunately unable to provide any coherent statements due to his dazed and critical condition.
Was there any clue at all from this horrific double crime?
The only real clue came from a local housekeeper, a woman named Eliza Virus.
Eliza Virus. What did she hear?
She lived quite close to the crime scene. She claimed that around 10 o'clock that Sunday night, she heard distinct gunshots, followed by a woman crying out in reproach. Soon after, she clearly heard the voice cry out, "Harry! Harry! Oh, Harry!"
Was this Harry ever identified?
No. This mysterious Harry was never definitively identified. The man who was eventually convicted for this double murder, Leighton Hines, a black man, was later proven innocent. Hines had been arrested based on an alleged confession. He later vehemently claimed it was coerced, intimidated out of him by authorities desperate for a conviction.
Another coerced confession.
Exactly. Despite his conviction, he was spared the death penalty. Authorities themselves later admitted doubts about his guilt, and he was eventually released when, chillingly, the murders continued. Just reinforced the belief the real killer was still out there. A stark reminder of the pressures and flawed techniques back then.
And like the Gilmans, the Markovitz siblings also came under suspicion here too. It seems like a pattern with the police.
Yes, unfortunately that pattern emerged again. Authorities often turned suspicion onto the victim's own family. 2 of Anna's brothers, Harry and Jacob, and her sister Bertha, were detained. Incredibly, authorities believe they disapproved of Anna and Abe's relationship and might have wanted to eliminate both.
That seems a stretch.
Sheriff Bowes even claimed a canvas finger stall found near the scene matched an injury on Brother Harry's thumb, a detail that seems pretty tenuous now. A pair of handkerchiefs were also found nearby. But they were all released on August 8th, the day of Anna's burial. They attended the funeral, where the local rabbi reportedly cursed the ground where she lost her life.
And the killings continued after their release.
Yes. That, combined with everything else, further pointed away from their involvement. It's also incredibly significant that this double murder occurred in literally the same area where Donna Gilman's body was found a year prior.
Right near McCabe Park again.
Just a few hundred feet separated the locations. This geographical clustering was becoming absolutely impossible to ignore.
Okay, let's fast forward to early 1909, January 24th. The next victim was 15-year-old Mary Forshner. She disappeared while on a seemingly simple errand, just going to deposit money in the bank. This case had some especially chilling details.
Mary was described as unusually pretty for her age. She left her stepfather Robert Geppert's home. He was a merchant with a Dayton Savings and Trust Company deposit book. It contained $9, which was a pretty considerable sum back then.
And she just didn't come back.
Right. When she didn't return by the expected time, 8:30 p.m., her parents became gravely alarmed. Robert Geppert, who worked as a meat cutter and had just gotten home, organized a search party with neighbors, armed with a lantern. They didn't actually notify authorities until midnight, maybe hoping to find her themselves first.
Understandable panic.
Before officers could even be dispatched, Geppert noticed some disturbed soil that led to a clear trail. It ended on the sprawling, shadowy estate of a Grafton C. Kennedy. There, with the aid of his lantern, Geppert found Mary's lifeless body in a shed.
Oh, her own stepfather found her. How awful.
That's devastating. The coroner concluded she'd been sexually assaulted, repeatedly struck on the head with a blunt instrument, and choked into unconsciousness. But what's truly incredible and deeply unsettling is that her bank book was found nearby, completely untouched. The $9 still inside.
The money wasn't taken.
Not touched. This detail immediately challenged the initial assumption of robbery as a motive. It pointed instead to a far sicker, more predatory goal. The killer's interest clearly wasn't money. And that chilling detail also aligns further with the MO of the Cumminsville Ripper, who also never robbed his victims.
What's striking about Mary Forshner's case, compared to some others, is that there seem to have been multiple eyewitnesses, or at least people who encountered the perpetrator.
Indeed. This case really stands out for the number of near misses and peripheral observations. A neighbor, Sam Morris, claimed he heard cries around 6:30 p.m. He saw a man near a dark spot in the fields and was actually threatened when he approached. He fired warning shots, but the man just vanished into the darkness.
He stumbled upon the crime.
Morris later estimated the time of the assault in passing was around 9:20 p.m., suggesting he was an unwitting eyewitness who might have interrupted the crime in progress. A terrifying thought. Another witness, Mrs. John Sheff, claimed a man appeared from the darkness and chased her after she got off a train near that same spot. She fortunately escaped into her home.
Wow. So close calls.
And even more chillingly, another woman, Mrs. James Powers, was attacked and rescued by her husband within 48 hours of Mary Forshner's passing, with disturbingly similar details: torn clothing, a bruised throat. It indicated a bold and brazen perpetrator attacking right out in the open, seemingly unconcerned.
Like he was getting more confident or desperate.
It speaks to an escalating confidence, yeah. Or perhaps desperation.
And the physical evidence in this case? Something about his hands?
Yes. The coroner, during the autopsy, established a crucial detail. The killer had abnormally large hands. His finger imprints extended far around Mary's neck, almost completely encompassing it. This became a key characteristic linked to the Strangler's methods.
A specific physical trait.
A very specific one. 4 days later, a Pennsylvania railroad detective reported seeing a man matching this description getting off a Dayton train in Springfield. Described as a black man with a roughly bandaged hand, a scratched face, maybe from a struggle wearing corduroy trousers, the same type reported near the scene.
Did they find him?
No. Despite the promising lead, he was never located. Charles Snyder, a factory worker boarding at the Geppert home, was briefly suspected. A barber claims Snyder came into his shop in a panicked state, washing off mud and what looked like evidence, but Snyder was ultimately cleared.
Again, near a rail line.
Yes. This case, like Donna Gilman's and the Markovitz-Cohen tragedy, took place just a few blocks from a rail line, once again highlighting the killer's likely method of travel and escape.
Then, just weeks later, still in January 1909, the reign of terror reached its chilling conclusion. 18-year-old Elizabeth Fullhart from nearby Vandalia vanished after arriving in Dayton looking for work. This would be the final case definitively attributed to the Dayton Strangler.
Her body was discovered a week later, on February 5th, by two workmen, Charles and Fred Weaver. They were preparing a vacant house for occupancy. They opened an old cistern at 124 North Jefferson Street, only to find her body, wrapped in a gunny sack, floating in the water.
In a cistern. Horrible.
She was pulled from the manhole and identified by her brother. What was particularly peculiar about this passing, Elizabeth appeared fully clothed, yet her undergarments were missing.
Missing? What does that suggest?
This striking detail suggested her killer had methodically redressed her before dumping her body in the cistern. Another unsettling act of staging by the perpetrator. Her passing occurred only about 5 days after Mary Forshner's murder, and incredibly within just 24 hours of Elizabeth arriving in Dayton.
Wow. Targeted almost immediately.
It implies she was targeted almost right away upon her arrival.
So what does this all mean for understanding how Elizabeth passed away? Was it clear-cut like the others, or were there questions?
Initially, authorities really struggled to determine the exact cause of death. Unlike the previous victims, there was a notable lack of the telltale choking fractures on her neck.
No strangulation marks.
Not the clear fractures seen before. This led to a range of theories: suicide, poisoning, maybe being thrown into the cistern alive with the sack tied around her head. This lack of definitive evidence just deepened the mystery. This case particularly shocked Dayton's residents, led to this palpable sense of fear that just permeated daily life. Church attendance among women dropped significantly. It became almost unheard of for any female to be unescorted at night.
The city must have been terrified.
Absolutely paralyzed with fear. And following Elizabeth's tragic passing, the killings definitively attributed to the Dayton Strangler just ceased, leading many to believe the killer either left the area, got caught for something else, or simply stopped.
And the location?
The location of her body was also strategically significant. Right in between the sites of the prior 4 murders, just 3 blocks from City Hall, in a densely settled part of Dayton, with streetcar access nearby, suggesting the killer operated comfortably right in the heart of the city.
Were there any prominent suspects in Elizabeth's case, or did the trail just go cold?
Several suspects were investigated and later released, again highlighting the immense challenges investigators faced. These included Frank Smith, a black man, who was also charged with attacking another young woman around the same time. Authorities suspected him based solely on that other crime, but he was cleared of Elizabeth's passing. Roy Cooley, a close friend, and Albert Wilkie, reputed to be her fiancé, were also detained but later released due to lack of evidence. Additionally, a former employer of a man named Elmer Carr accused him of being responsible for arson, pickpocketing, and 3 murders, including Elizabeth's. They'd been seen together.
Yeah,
But, ironically, the same employer later made another statement that exonerated Carr for Elizabeth's specific case.
So another dead end.
Exactly. Elizabeth's resting place is particularly poignant. She's sadly buried in an unmarked grave her father purchased in 1909, next to a tree at Poplar Hill Cemetery in Vandalia. A quiet, mournful end to a life cut tragically short, and an officially unsolved case.
Okay, we've walked through these horrifying individual cases, each one a distinct tragedy, yet laced with these disturbing commonalities. Let's try to connect the dots now. What specific patterns emerged that finally allowed police and investigators to link these crimes to a single perpetrator, the Dayton Strangler? It seems, despite the initial confusion and false leads, they did start to recognize a chilling signature.
They absolutely did, and this recognition was critical, though maybe it came too late for some victims. The police and investigators eventually linked these crimes due to the striking similarity of the deaths and, crucially, the tight geographical proximity of each murder location. The common threads weaving through these cases included bludgeoning frequently with a blunt instrument like a cane or blackjack, followed by strangulation and sexual assault.
And the victims?
Predominantly young women, often attacked in public or semi-public spaces, then sometimes dragged to more secluded areas, a telltale sign of a predator seeking control. And there was that clear, disturbing tendency for the killer to target the victim's throat as the primary method of ending their life, a consistent, terrifying signature across cases. This shared MO, combined with the alarming cluster of crimes around specific areas of Dayton, strongly suggested a single, monstrous figure at work.
Now, this is a critical piece, maybe the most fascinating theory. The Dayton Strangler might actually be the same killer who terrorized Cincinnati years earlier, the Cumminsville Ripper. Let's really unpack this connection. If true, it paints an even broader, more unsettling picture of terror across Ohio.
This is indeed a key area of analysis, and frankly, it's quite chilling when you lay out the evidence side by side. The Cumminsville Ripper, active in Cincinnati from 1904, had an almost identical modus operandi: bludgeoning victims, strangling them into unconsciousness, sexually assaulting them, then often leaving them for dead.
Sounds incredibly similar.
When we compare this to the Dayton Stranglers' attacks on Donna Gilman, Mary Forshner, and the Markovitz-Cohan case, the parallels are just undeniable. We see attacks from behind, victims being dragged, and that unmistakable focus on the throat. Consider the unexplained dry gloves at Donna Gilman's scene, her body being moved. These details align perfectly with the Ripper's potential staging of scenes, attempting to mislead investigators, obscure his tracks. It speaks to a level of cunning, a detached disregard that transcends mere impulse.
And his method of transportation, the way he seemed to move between and within these cities, that seems like another significant link too.
Precisely. Both killers seem to expertly utilize the extensive train and streetcar lines to stalk victims and to make their escapes. They often struck near rail lines, were in areas adjacent to cemeteries typically isolated, offering cover.
Like the Home Avenue spur in Dayton.
Exactly. That remote, solitary dead-end line serving the cemetery and Soldier's Home was a repeated, ominous location for the Dayton Strangler. This is strikingly similar to how the Cumminsville Ripper operated near Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, frequently seen by train conductors just as trains entered or exited the cemetery grounds.
So maybe he worked for the railroad, or just knew the system really well.
It raises that intriguing yet terrifying possibility. He might have worked for the railroad, or at least intimately understood their schedules and operations, using them as his silent means to travel, hunt, and vanish. Suggests a killer with a methodical understanding of the urban landscape and its transit systems, turning them into arteries of terror.
Okay, but the use of a gun, particularly in the Markovitz-Cohan case, that's a glaring difference, isn't it? The Cumminsville Ripper didn't use firearms in his documented attacks. How do we reconcile that?
That's a very astute point, and it's one of the most frequently raised counter-arguments to the theory. While a gun was used prominently in the Markovitz-Cohan case and potentially threatened in the Forshner case, it can be argued the killer only resorted to it when a male was present, or when faced with significant, unexpected resistance.
So adapting his methods?
Possibly. His preferred method, bludgeoning and strangulation, was designed to overpower women directly. The use of a gun in the presence of Abe Cohan, the male victim, might suggest adaptability. He might have felt the need to streamline the attack, eliminate resistance quickly when a man was involved. Suggests an evolution, maybe becoming a more advanced killer, willing to vary his tools.
Interesting take.
Furthermore, the use of a baton or blackjack concealable weapons suggests forethought, an attempt to deceive, indicates planning, not just spontaneous violence. It's a subtle but potentially important shift.
Okay, so if we accept this compelling theory that they are the same killer, what explains the big gaps in the timeline? between the 1904 Cincinnati attacks and the 1906 Dayton ones, and even within the Dayton series itself. Those breaks could seem to disprove the link.
That's a crucial question and certainly one of the biggest challenges. One strong speculation rooted in the limited record-keeping of the era is that the killer might have been imprisoned for a minor infraction in the interim.
Like caught for something else entirely.
Exactly. Served a short sentence for, say, burglary or a less severe assault, perhaps in a nearby town like Hamilton or Sharonville, just outside his known territory. Then, upon release, decided to start fresh in Dayton, just 60 miles from his old hunting grounds.
And the timing fits.
The 2-year gap between the last Cumminsville Ripper attack in November 1904 and the first Dayton Strangler attack in November 1906 aligns eerily well with a potential short prison sentence. The gaps within the Dayton series itself could also indicate periods where he was active elsewhere, undocumented, moving via rail to new hunting grounds without leaving a connected trail, or simply dormant periods.
And records back then just weren't good enough to track that.
Sadly, no. Record-keeping in the early 1900s wasn't thorough or centralized like today. Tracing movements or short imprisonments is incredibly difficult. Many small arrests or crimes might have gone unrecorded in a system just not designed for pattern recognition across jurisdictions, making it nearly impossible to connect dots across regions or over time.
Which brings us back to the fact that despite all this, despite numerous arrests, confessions, even that wrongful conviction, the Dayton Strangler remains officially unidentified, his identity lost to history. Why was this case just so incredibly difficult to solve, even with the disturbing patterns that eventually did emerge?
The investigation faced these immense, almost insurmountable challenges. We've talked about the rudimentary forensics, the slow communication, the decentralized law enforcement. But what's truly incredible, and frankly quite heartbreaking, is that historical accounts suggest this confluence of human factors. Pride, greed, politics, grandstanding among law enforcement and even private detectives, sometimes overshadowing the pure pursuit of justice.
So infighting and politics got in the way.
It seems so. Instead of seamless collaboration, there were instances of one-upmanship, rivalries between departments, individuals trying to claim credit. It severely hampered a unified investigation. This fragmentation meant vital clues might have been missed or mishandled. Crucial communication between departments was often poor or non-existent. Local police, county sheriffs, private detectives might have each pursued their own leads without sharing information effectively, allowing the true perpetrator to just slip through the cracks.
Beyond the more prominent suspects we've already discussed, David Curtis, the families, Leighton Hines, were there others caught in this desperate investigation?
Oh, absolutely. The list of people suspected at one point or another is remarkably long, really illustrates the desperate attempts to find the killer amidst limited evidence. There was James Rogers, described as a professional tramp. His transient nature made him an easy target. A mysterious Mr. Poole's suspect who claimed to know the killer but was debunked. Lots of false leads, attention seekers. Authorities looked into an unnamed black man seen talking to Donna Gilman on a train. William Partlawn, a Spanish-American war veteran seen near a crime scene with injuries.
The list goes on.
It does. We mentioned the Markovitz siblings, Charles Snyder, the factory worker, Frank Smith, alias J.E. Smith, charged with attacking another girl, suspected solely based on that, Roy Cooley, Elizabeth Fulhart's friend, Albert Wilkie, her rumored fiancé, Elwood Weimer, a black Canadian arrested over in Hamilton. The sheer number of suspects, combined with the lack of a cohesive physical description, often due to dark conditions, fast attacks just complicated everything. Eyewitness accounts were subjective, inconsistent, fleeting.
So what does the passage of over a century mean now? Is there any hope left for finding answers to these cold cases? Or are these secrets truly lost?
With over 100 years gone, the unfortunate reality is that most people alive, then police, investigators, witnesses, are no longer living. That severely limits new leads, direct testimony, finding unknown evidence. Records from that era are often incomplete, poorly cataloged, or just lost to time, decay.
But the BCI keeps track.
Yes, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation now maintains a comprehensive database of unsolved homicides, including older cases like these. But the chances of a definitive resolution just decrease significantly with each passing decade. It's an uphill battle, relying on faint hopes of a forensic breakthrough on degraded evidence, if any even exists, or the unlikely discovery of overlooked documents.
So what does this lack of closure mean for the victims and their families, even generations later? It must be this enduring, haunting pain.
The pain undeniably persists, even generations later. It's a haunting reminder that official justice was never found for their loved ones. The identity of the monster remains shrouded in mystery. However, there are still people deeply invested in these stories, driven by a desire for truth, a need to keep the memory of the victims alive.
Like Mary Forshner's great-nephew.
Exactly, Brian Forshner. He dedicated himself to researching the case, published a book, Cold Serial, The Jack the Strangler Murders. He really delves deep, painstakingly re-examining the evidence. And Brian Forshner actually speculates that a janitor named Hick White, who attacked another woman, Bessie Stickford, in 1910, might be responsible for all, or at least most, of these horrific crimes.
Hick White. What happened with him?
White's attack on Bessie Stickford was particularly chilling. He lured her with a job promise, then held her at knife point in a synagogue. He was convicted and imprisoned only for Bessie's case, which is a key detail because the string of crimes against girls and young women in Dayton abruptly ended right when he was incarcerated.
Wow. So the killing stopped when he went to prison.
Exactly. This theory suggests the killer was caught, but for a different crime, leaving the Strangler murders officially unsolved. A tantalizing, tragic piece of historical irony. It offers a glimmer of a potential answer, even if it's one that can never be definitively proven in a court of law now.
This deep dive into the Dayton Strangler has revealed just a terrifying, incredibly complex chapter in American criminal history. From the individual tragedies of Ada Lance, Donna Gilman, Anna Markovitz, and Ade Cohen, Mary Forshner, and Elizabeth Fullhart, to the overarching mystery of this phantom killer who just vanished. The case remains officially unsolved, a dark stain on Dayton's past.
The parallels between the Dayton Strangler and the Cumminsville Ripper are just undeniable, aren't they? Suggesting this single, chilling figure who rode the rails of Ohio, leaving a trail of terror. And it really raises an important question for us to ponder. If this individual was indeed moving between cities via rail, could there be other unlinked victims? In neighboring communities, maybe neighboring states, hidden and forgotten records, the gaps in our current knowledge, could someone like a specialized railroad historian or genealogist familiar with those routes, schedules, maybe even train crew records from that era, could they uncover something?
It's a fascinating thought. The lack of resolution, over a century later, just underscores the profound limitations of early forensics and the enduring challenge of identifying a predator who simply disappeared. As you reflect on this case, just consider the profound impact that reign of terror must have had on everyday life in Dayton back then. Imagine the palpable fear, the creeping suspicion, the way it would have fundamentally altered how people moved through their own city, how mothers guarded their daughters, how that sense of security was just completely shattered. And think about how many other hidden stories, how many other cold cases might still be out there waiting to be connected if only we had the right information to piece together these fractured timelines.